Ready?
G'day everyone, welcome back. It is I, Lyle Swithenbank, back with another installment of Flock, the Pelicans podcast, part of the Old Man Squad Sports Network. We're still getting that to roll off the tongue. It takes a little bit of work, as you know. I'm joined with our inaugural guest one, Christian Clark, the man himself from NOLA.com, Times-Picayune, and In the Wing podcast. Christian, how you going, mate? Thanks for joining us.
What's up, man? It's we're in the scorching part of the summer in Louisiana, and you told me it's cool over there. I'm kind of jealous right now. You got the sweater on, you look cozy. I'm not cozy at all right now.
Yeah, no, it is. It's that time of year for us. I mean, Perth's one of those places a little bit temperate. So we don't get snow. We don't, it rains maybe 2 or 3 weeks a year. It's never really up, never really down. We have hot summers, but then it doesn't sound like quite as hot as what you're quite experiencing at the moment as you head into hurricane season, you were saying before.
I'm just praying the AC is gonna hold up, man. I just sit there and pray twice a day. I'm like, please hold up, please hold up.
No, I feel that, and I mean, for us, it's the little fan heaters that are floating around trying to break the chill. But yeah, no, the AC during summer is key, and fingers crossed that holds up for you. But I suppose Pelicans, hey, we're in the off season. The season's ticked over. We're officially in the 24-25 season now. All hell is broken loose in free agency. And the Pelicans sort of got the jewel in the crown, acquiring DeJounte Murray. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, if you could break down the trade and what you thought the Pelicans managed to achieve by grabbing him.
I thought it was a good deal for the Pelicans. I thought that, Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and 2 firsts going out. I felt like that was pretty fair value. I didn't feel like the Pelicans, had to pay an arm or a leg or anything like that. They needed to address the lead guard spot. I mean, I think that was one of my big takeaways coming off of that playoff series. And it really, when I looked back at these past 2 seasons as a whole, I mean, we've kind of seen the Pelicans try this point guard by committee experiment. There's been some success, specifically with Zion on the ball, initiating the offense. It's been an effective look for the Pelicans, but I think, it's fair to say, like, after spending 5 seasons with Zion, hey, look, let's just get a lead guard in here. Let's get some creation. Like the playoff series that they had against Oklahoma City, it wasn't just like bad offense. It was like historically bad offense. If you look at like all the offensive ratings for playoff teams in the last 10 years, like that was down there in terms of anybody in the past decade. So they had to do something to address the lead guard spot. DeJounte's big. He's on a good contract. He's productive. He plays a lot. He rarely misses games. So he checks a lot of boxes for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, a different look, a different personality. The lead guard. I think we saw the effects, I think, of Zion having to do a lot more than perhaps he'd anticipated down the stretch. And we get to the playing game, the hamstring goes, does the additional workload and being 1A and 1B with BI being out, it's a whole heap of what ifs. We roll into the playoffs without your best player, and gosh, we didn't really fire a shot. And Lou Dort looked all world, and that for me is disappointing. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think the trade, again, yeah, fair value, great that they managed to keep BI in that, and didn't overpay. We gave up draft picks that weren't even ours, so you're sitting there going, well, potentially we're giving up one or the other in that second one, whatever's worse, for the later pick. But for me, you still have a whole heap of draft picks, whole heap of assets sitting there while you're still getting better, which I'm happy with. I thought it was great. Now, speaking of the playoffs, I suppose we'll start there because we've sort of touched on it a little bit. it felt a bit of a misfire or almost a dull note, I guess. Well, I mean, I was watching on TV. I wasn't in the stadium, but it was almost like fans had sort of lost interest at that point. Maybe that's the Zion effect. Bi just returning and wasn't at his best. I think that's well documented. Do you think fans lost interest in that? Like the stadium didn't look quite as full as it was, and um, it really, I don't know. It just didn't feel like that playoff atmosphere that usually I'd see on TV and go, "Gosh, get me on an airplane and get me over there." But what were your thoughts on the ground?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation and something you obviously picked up on the other side of the
Mm,
world that I think was accurate. It was a much different feeling compared to 2 years ago when the Pelicans, were in that first round series against the Phoenix Suns. That building was packed out, the excitement level was at a 10, and that just wasn't the case this past year. I think Zion getting injured in that play-in tournament game was so debilitating. I mean, it was just hard for, I mean, morale to feel high after that. It's like, oh my gosh, we've been through this like 4.5 year odyssey of Zion. We haven't got to see him in the playoffs yet, and we're not going to get to see him in the playoffs for a fifth year, even though he's finally been consistently on the court, playing 70 games this past season. So I think that definitely was a gut punch. I think it was also, this year I believe that Phoenix series a couple years ago, they won one of the first two games, and so I think they were coming back to New Orleans 1-1.
yeah.
This year they're coming back 0-2. They just got crushed in game two against Oklahoma City. I think it was a little bit of a weird weekend where like you kind of have to be here to pick up on this, but like Jazz Fest was that weekend, for example. That's like one of the biggest draws in New Orleans that happens, any time of the year here. So there's a lot going on. But yeah, I mean, I think the main thing was just Zion not being there. I think that really changed things.
Yeah, and it felt like that. I mean, as a fan, obviously not on the ground and in and amongst it all, you watch every game and then you see the last, what was it? It was about 5 minutes to go or something in that last quarter against the Lakers, and he grabs the hamstring, and anyone that's done a hamstring um, knows that initial grab and where it tightens up and you go, "Ooh." And he came down and the little bounce as he walked back, you've done one. I mean, as to the level of what you've done, you're sitting there going, I'm in a bit of strife here. I can only imagine how he felt. I think that's the saddest part because he looked all world at the time, looked absolutely unreal. Particularly, if we have a look at last season, the way it sort of transpired, obviously the in-season tournament, we're world beaters until we play the Lakers, get absolutely trounced on, international TV worldwide, and then it sort of kicks everyone into gear, and we start playing, win that 49 games, and then it sort of deteriorates. Yeah, it just felt, we get to the playoffs, it felt like, oh, another one of these. We're doing this again. We can't just have nice things for once. Which I think, yeah, was disappointing. And, then we get DeJounte Murray and, we're right back up there. We're back. Um, so I suppose the specter looming over the Pelicans at the moment is Brandon Ingram. At the end of the season, he talked about, we need to get better. We need to get point guard. We got one. That he knew that he had to be better as well. What are the thoughts on Brandon Ingram? We're getting conflicting messaging. We're trading him. Griff comes out, says we want to keep him. Bryson says he want to keep him. It's obviously like cash is what it's about. Is there any chance that he stays here, or do you think what are the odds, do you think, stay versus trade?
So here's my read on the Ingram situation. I put out, I think in May, that the Pelicans were not willing to pay his full max, which is $208 million over 4 years. I think the Pelicans are open to bringing him back at a figure, below that. If that's $52 million in average annual value. I think there's like a number below that the Pelicans feel comfortable at. I still think the most likely scenario is that Brandon gets traded here in the next few weeks. And I just think that unless the Pelicans, they've definitely looked at the marketplace, they've looked closely at some deals in the past week and everything like that. I think like they would just have to feel like, I just hate all of these deals. There's nothing I feel good about. I mean, and I think they will find something, whether it's uh two or a three-way deal. I mean, David Griffin's a very creative deal maker, but I think the most likely scenario is Brandon Ingram, moving on and that forward slot, starting forward slot opening up for Trey Murphy, who I think there's a really good chance he's going to get an extension later this summer.
Yeah, it seems to be that way, and I think the way it seems to be leaning is that perhaps that the relationship is done, and that it's best for both parties to say, well, hang on, we need to pivot. XYZ reasons. You can't blame him. He's been a great servant of the club throughout the journey, and I can't fault his contributions. But I think perhaps for his career as well, 52 million is a lot to pay when you're paying, 35 for CJ. You're paying, we're kicking about 40 or so for Zion. DeJounte's at 30. We've got a lot of salary stacked up. It adds up quickly, and you still got a gaping hole at the center position after Jonas walked in free agency, which we knew was going to happen. But that, I suppose, is the big hole at the moment. It is the center spot. Do you think he gets used to try to get an A grade center? We've seen the carousel of these, D grade, C grade sort of fringe centers re-sign and get big money, which some of those are terrifying. I exclude Isaiah Hartenstein from that because he's actually really good. But um, do you think that's sort of what they'd be positioning themselves for, or would it be more of a, oh, let's get some draft picks? And I've seen a Kings trade that was like, give us Harrison Barnes, and I'm sort of like, well, I don't really want to take a step back to go forward. But again, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they almost have to use him to acquire a starting center in some way, because right now the only centers on the roster are Eve Messi and Jeremiah Robinson Earl, if you want to call him a center. And I think there could be a minimum center who is added. Like last year, Cody Zeller occupied that role, just veteran minimum, kind of break glass in case of emergency. But I think it's just going to be difficult when you look at the guys who are still unrestricted free agents. If the Pelicans were to sign any of them and like start them, I wouldn't feel great about that. So it's almost just like, okay, they used two of the tradable salaries they had already in Larry Nance Jr. and Dyson Daniels. There's not a ton left, besides Brandon Ingram. I mean, and this I'm just throwing this out there like a hypothetical. Like if they didn't use the Brandon Ingram chip to get a starting center, it's like if you look at Jordan Hawkins, like one of them that I think people throw out there, like Jordan Hawkins, like Jalen Duran or something like that. So, I mean, I guess there are other ways to do it. It's conceivable, but it just doesn't seem likely. Like the most likely outcome just seems like using Brandon Ingram to go out and try to get that starting center. They've loved Jared Allen forever. I think
Yeah.
that's like their number one option. They liked Wendell Carter Jr. a lot before the trade deadline. To me, he's a great fit, and I would love that move, assuming he can actually stay healthy, and he never stays healthy. But like those are two of the best options I see out there. I don't know if the Cavs are going to trade Jared Allen or not. They're kind of posturing like they're not right now. Wendell Carter Jr., the Magic have re-signed three of their bigs this
Yeah.
offseason, and Mo Wagner, Goga Batatse, and Jonathan. I guess they gave Jonathan Isaac an extension. They didn't re-sign him. So it's like, okay, they got four bigs already. Is Wendell Carter Jr. going to be on the move? But those are two of like the names I look at that if the Pelicans were to get him, I'd feel pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on both of those. And I mean, Jared Allen, I mean, if I was putting a team together on paper, he just fits the bill completely. And I think he's fantastic. I've rated him. I don't know whether or not, how much say Donovan Mitchell has in all of this after he's just re-signed that mega contract. Seems to be his besties with Kobe Altman there. And when you get the opportunity to get paid 50 odd million and then the chance to extend to what 75, 80 million a year, not a bad pay packet to take back, to be fair. I'd probably listen to him too because he's probably the highest paid player in the whole organization, or highest paid person in the entire organization of all time. Probably half the payroll, to be fair. Just goes to him. Interesting though that the Wendell Carter Jr. trade again, he could be the odd man out there. I like him as well. It's always been injuries, right? He's one of those guys that when he plays and gets his legs back under him, you're like, that's the guy, that's the player, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, I've got an ankle, knee, shoulder, whatever it is, and it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Like it just seems to be a revolving cycle, and we love that sort of track record. So let's get him down and add him to the revolving carousel of injuries. But yeah, those sorts of guys, that flexible, you know, sort of lean center that can come out in the perimeter, block shots. It's definitely what they're trying to pivot to. And I know that's been the discussion for a long time when they try to move Jonas and things like that. We need a guy that isn't just stuck in mud on defense, basically, for want of a better phrase. Yeah, shame to see Brandon go, but again, you can't keep everyone. You can't just play with 5 guys on your roster and then trade everything else. They've seen that fail spectacularly in the past. So, in terms of timings, I mean, people were up in arms. Why isn't he Brandon traded by the draft? What is the time frame on this? It could take as long as it takes, right? We've got him under contract until the end of next year or end of this season. Do you think it happens before the season? If it does,
Yeah, I think it happens before the season if it does. I think the Pelicans, there wasn't a ton of movement on it before the draft, and I think just the general activity throughout the league has picked up after the draft. I think teams post draft have called on Brandon. The Pelicans have had, some meaningful discussions with other teams. I don't know enough to say like they've gotten close on any deals. Like there's stuff that's been rumored that you've heard about.
yeah,
But they're seriously exploring trades right now. And, I think it could happen in the next 2 weeks. And, if it doesn't happen in the next 2 weeks, then maybe you think about getting an extension done. But yeah, I would be shocked if there's not an extension or he's traded by the start of the season if they're just like going into the season with him on an expiring.
yeah. I think that would be like the worst outcome of anything. I think that just becomes a distraction. Then we ask the national media to talk about us. That's what the narrative's just going to be the entire time. Where's he going, and what's he doing? And so I think, for everyone's sake, please at least do something before then. But yeah, I look forward to seeing that transpire. Now, this was the summer of not being complacent. That was the big sort of catchphrase that Griff fed us at the end of last season. Do you think so far, based on what you've sort of heard and seen, are we being complacent? Obviously, DeJounte Murray shows that no, we're gonna mess some things up. We're gonna move some things around. Do you think that gives him the pass mark in terms of the new front office with Bryson as well? If all else fails, we re-sign Brandon, we get some, I don't know, second, third string center and just plug him in while Eve sort of develops. Do you think he passes the mark on not being complacent, or do you think the DeJounte Murray trade sort of gets him across the line and look what we did, like they can wipe their hands of sort of any more aggressive, for want of a better term, moves?
Yeah, I mean, like the DeJounte Murray trade was, I think, a win for the Pelicans and showed they weren't going to sit on their hands. I never understood. I mean, like, there's valid criticism of David Griffin, but like one thing he's shown throughout his career, he will take risks and completely reimagine his roster and go for it. And sometimes he will succeed and sometimes he will fail. But the one thing he will do is get some shots up. So, I mean, I always thought like, yeah, this is going to change quite a bit coming into the summer. I didn't really understand like the angst about like, oh, he hasn't done that much going into the draft. It's like, okay, the offseason just started, like it's about to heat up. So yeah, I mean, like they've made major changes already. I mean, like Larry Nance Jr. closed for the Pelicans at center most times last season. Like your closing center is already gone. Najee Marshall, I think the Pelicans, it would have been great to keep him, but look, there's just financial realities, and it just made sense for Najee. And I think they're actually happy for Najee too.
Yeah.
That hey, look, you've given us like a couple great years and great value. Like, go and get your money. So I mean, like I think the DeJounte Murray trade was a nice move for the Pelicans, but it's still an incomplete. We just have to see what happens with this Ingram trade before we hand out any grades. They have to get this right. Ideally, you get this. I mean, Jared Allen, I guess, is a somewhat similar to player to Ingram in terms of like he's a one-time All-Star. He's 26 years old, like kind of the same caliber of player. So like maybe you don't get draft capital if you're able to land him, but like Wendell Carter Jr. Ideally that guy or guys who are not as good as Wendell Carter Jr. You want that and you want draft capital
Yeah.
if you're moving off of Brandon Ingram.
And does he get the Mikal Bridges type deal? Probably not, right? Like we're not going to be getting six. What was it? Five first rounders, and he hasn't even been an
Yeah.
All Star. That was insane. But is Brandon Ingram worth Mikal Bridges? Do we get the same package? I suppose is what someone values him, right?
I mean, that would that would be incredible. I think like one of the things we're seeing is contracts really matter. Like I think Mikal Bridges, I would have to look up what his number is, but
Yeah.
I think it's like 20 million
Mm,
and you're gonna have to pay him, eventually. But that's the thing with Brandon Ingram. It's like, okay, the number he's on next year is pretty good. I think it's like 36. It's the number after that I think, would prevent you from getting this crazy haul or whatever. I just think like if you're gonna make Brandon Ingram a $52 million player, that's that's a lot for he's very good. He's just not quite elite or anything like that. So I think, the number matters here.
yeah, completely agree. And it's funny how as the cap spikes and TV rights deals kick in and the salaries go up and up and up. I remember when Mike Conley signed that massive deal at the time, became the highest paid player, and everyone was like, "What are you talking about?" And now he's on like his money is high, but it's like a delicious deal compared to what guys are signing now. Like we said before, Donovan Mitchell looking like 80 million a year, which is just crazy, insane. After time, perhaps we look back and say, geez, Brandon on 52 million is a bargain. And I do that in quotation marks for those that are just listening on audio. But right in the current market, I don't think you can pay him that. And I mean, there's been some other guys. I think Pascal Siakam took less than the max from memory. I think he took about 190 odd, which is, still insane. Um, could
Manuel quickly got $175 million this summer.
Well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah. I think it's
he's
just situational. It's like Brandon, to me, I think the Pelicans might have to pay that. If they didn't have
mm,
Trey Murphy, you could just plug in
yeah,
there. And even if you paid it and it didn't work out, you could look next summer to move him. But I just think it's just the context and the situation
yeah,
matters of look, Trey Murphy, he's definitely not as good as Brandon, but you can argue the basketball fit next to Zion is better. And, he might cost half as less.
yeah, yeah. That's the reality of it, isn't it? And we've seen that throughout, NBA history of what was it, the Danny Granger getting kicked to the curb because of Paul George's emergence. We see the sort of next guy coming through, and it comes down to fit and potential and things like that. So, I'll be devastated to lose Brandon, but at the same time, understand the reality of basketball, and sometimes you have to send people away to improve the team because at the end of the day, it's the name on the front, not the name on the back that we're all going to be cheering for um, when we win a championship, which hopefully it's this year. You never know. It's 0-0 at the minute. Now, before we wrap up, and I appreciate you jumping on and having a chat with us, I want you to cast your sort of lens or telescope to the end of this season. I mean, look at this. Look how early this is. Was it 3rd of July in Australia? It's the 2nd of July in the US, and what, second day of free agency, second day of the new year. What would be I would like you to do your ideal outcome and a realistic outcome of what this Pels season could look like if you want to cast your lens that far. What would you like to see happen? I mean, and then what do you think is probably realistic in terms of where we end up on the ladder, or where Brandon Ingram ends up, things like that.
I mean, I think what I would like to see happen and what I'm hopeful to see happen is it felt like the light bulb went off for Zion a little bit last season in terms of recognition of, hey, look, I just have to be a little bit better about taking care of my body and doing the things I need to do to be the best version of myself when the game is not going on. Eating a little bit better, just like being being really strict about taking care of your body. And I think he made some strides, and I'm hopeful that continues. Like the stuff you hear about him this summer is good. So like just showing up to camp in great shape would be a great place for the Pelicans to start, so they're not having to play catch up. We know Zion like has the potential to be an all NBA guy. I mean, Brandon Ingram is excellent, but like I've seen enough to be like, okay, I don't know if Brandon has all NBA potential. Maybe he's just kind of like a fringe all-star guy, which is still a very good player, but Zion could be a top 10 player in the NBA, and it would be great to see him, I guess fulfill that potential.
Yeah, completely agree with that. That it all hinges on him, really, isn't it? We've lent in completely now, and gosh, when you see him play, he's just he's something else. I don't even know how to describe watching when I was over there and watched him live. He's just completely different beast. He's unstoppable. Um, so I mean, there's a lot to be excited about, and seeing the photos. People are like, oh, I got a photo with Zion. He looks great. To be fair, I mean, we all say this in the off season because no one's seen him move around. But from what snips we've seen of him out and about, he looks to be taking care of himself, which that only bodes well, like you said, coming into the camp. And if we can hit the ground running, I think we need to start treating October, November, December the same as we treat February, March in terms of the wins, because you're chasing your tail at the end of the day when you're having to fight for seeding down the stretch like this year, where it came down to winning or losing what Spurs
And
game.
there's so little margin for error in the conference the Pelicans play in too. It's a completely different story if you're in the Eastern Conference. I think 49 wins would have gotten you the third seed in the
Yeah.
East last year. So it's completely different playing in the West, and you can't play catch up. You got to avoid devastating injuries. The margin for error is so small. And I mean, like the Rockets, I'm just kind of like watching them. Like, are they going to try to do something big? The Spurs are going to be better than they were last year. The Grizzlies are definitely going to be better. That's three teams in the Pelicans division right there that I'm like, look, there's a good chance they're better than they were last year.
Yeah, and with the Mavericks going after Clay Thompson as well, that. Oh, yeah, that division
Yeah.
is terrifying. Last year it was wide open, and this year it it feels like a gauntlet. To be fair, okay, so you got better as well. We got these. Yeah, the West is an arms race in the West. They've really everyone's trying to gather the players and make a run at it. I think it's wide open, and like we saw the Mavs, go to the finals from the fifth seed. It really is anyone's game. Even playing teams, last year were all really good at full strength. So, oof, it's terrifying. But Christian, on that note, I appreciate you taking the time. Can you shout out what's going on? What do you got coming up? What's in the pipeline? Is there anything you can let us know that you're working on, or that's coming up for you?
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. You guys can read my stuff on Noel.com. You can listen to my podcast from the wing. We're on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. And nothing crazy, just kind of reacting to the free agent cycle. We'll be out in Vegas at Summer League. I'm excited to get to go to do that. Maybe going to check out the Sphere again. I got to do the Sphere when I was there in December for the in-season tournament and saw a film. And I'm hoping to see some live music, man, because it's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds like a great summer, and yeah, I'm very jealous because I would like to go to summer league too. But Christian, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, and thanks for your insights. It's always really good to hear from people that are on the ground that are in amongst it all, and so thanks for taking the time, and we'll have to do it again sometime. But with that being said, it's the end of the first episode with a guest for Flock. So, as always, we'll leave it at that. I'm your host, Lyle Swithenbank. This has been Flock at Lyle Swithenbank on Twitter. Stay safe, and of course, bye for now.
Ready?